Hello and welcome to Business Connections. I'm Cathy Peterson, a volunteer with the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce. Today's topic is an important one for business leaders in the Dayton region. Workforce is consistently the #1 concern for member businesses when asked in our annual member survey. Today we welcome from Columbus Mr. Ryan Burgess, Director of the Governor's Office of Workforce Transformation, and the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce's own President and CEO, Phil Parker. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. It's always great to see you and talk about such an important topic.
It is indeed.
Absolutely. In the next half hour, we plan to dive into work that's being done around workforce. And I'll start with you, Mr. Burgess. Could you give us an overall idea of our workforce situation in the state of Ohio?
Yeah, great. Well, Cathy, first of all, thanks for having me today. Great to be here and great to spend the day in Dayton. First, a little bit about our office, the Governor's Office of Workforce Transformation. Governor Kasich created it when he came into office, really recognizing the importance of workforce across the state. So our role in our office is to work with 13 state agencies and about 100 different programs that touch workforce at the state level. We work with his Executive Workforce Board to set the strategic direction for the state of Ohio when it comes to workforce. So that's the role that we play. I think Governor Kasich, he is so passionate about this issue for a couple reasons. One, he wants businesses to thrive in the state of Ohio, and you have to have a skilled and productive workforce to compete in the global economy that we're in. And then he also wants individuals to be able to rise to his or her God-given potential. And a way that you can do that is with a good job. So that's the role that our office plays and how we work with the Governor's Executive Workforce Board to try to set forward his strategic vision for the state. To answer your question directly about kind of how we view workforce in the state right now, we have a lot of positive momentum in the state. Since 2011, almost 450,000 private sector jobs have been created, which is great. When you look at wage growth, our wages continue to outpace national averages across the country. And then when you look at the labor pool, meaning the number of people who are actively seeking employment, we're seeing growth in the labor pool. So we have a lot of momentum in the state. The challenges we have, I would say, are kind of more macro level. When you look at automation and technology and how that is going to impact our workforce and the jobs and the skills that you need for those jobs, that is definitely a challenge we can't lose track of. And then when you also look at demographics across the state, the population growth in Ohio has been flat over going back 40, 50 years. When you look at the population, it's also aging. So those are some demographics that we can't lose of as we move forward in the state of Ohio when we address some of the workforce challenges that we do have.
And I like that, it's called workforce transformation. It was a very thoughtful decision to call it that because we are in transformation.
Absolutely.
Now, talk a little bit about that. We were very strong manufacturing, which we still are, but transformation.
Right, it is. And our economy, not only across the world, but here in the state of Ohio, our economy is changing from a more goods-based economy to a service-based economy. And that's going to have an impact, again, on the jobs that we offer here. Governor Kasich, he's worked hard to try to, along with the legislature, to make Ohio more conducive to job creation and trying to entice different industries that come to Ohio. So manufacturing and agriculture are always going to be important to the state, but how can we also attract the Amazons, the IBM Data Analytics Center that's in Central Ohio? How can we bring new industries here to create more jobs for Ohioans? Absolutely.
And Mr. Parker, you hear from business leaders every single day. What are some of the things that you're hearing from them?
Well, Cathy, that's a great question because you're right. We've done a number of surveys. We talk to the business community. We interact with a number of other organizations like Ryan's. And we keep hearing the feedback is, do we really have the qualified workers that we need to make this transformation? And that's a very insightful word, as you said, because we are going through this transformation in the state that we need to make sure that our citizens, and when I say citizens, I'm not just talking about just our youth, I'm talking about all age groups that want and need to work in this state. We need to make sure that they're all ready, that they all have the skill sets so that they can perform and be in productive careers. And that's one of our greatest challenges. I mean, when you look at our region, we've got so much to offer. We've got people, but we just need to make sure that they are trained and ready for the work of the future. And I think every state probably in the union is going through this, but certainly Ohio is. And I can appreciate the governor's vision, his enthusiasm over this subject as a person that has worked in the private sector. I think he truly gets what's happening out there. And I think he really wants to make sure that we make this transformation to get the people of Ohio back to work. And Ryan has shared over time with many of us this whole concept of if people are working, they are typically not in poverty, let alone they are creating good middle class families and incomes. And that's where we want to be in Ohio.
Yeah. What are some of the industries that you see, for those that aren't familiar with our workforce challenges, what are some of the industries that need trained workers
Oh, that's a great
right
question.
now?
Great question. So as you started the show and you said we have historically been a manufacturing town. So you're right. So your viewers will look at our community and say, well, we have been historically manufacturing and to a great degree a military town. But let's take the manufacturing piece. It's not just the assembly, the routine assembly of parts or making of parts. It's now using advanced materials and advanced concepts of manufacturing, and that takes a little bit different skill set of, no offense, of just hanging something on like a fender. It really now creates a use of computerization and some other skills that perhaps some of our citizens have never had access to. And we need to make sure that those types of jobs are going to have the education, the training. And by the way, and I'm sure Ryan will probably mention this, education doesn't always mean a 4-year degree. Let me stress that. Education can mean a lot of things. It can mean certifications. Certainly in the old days we thought of just a high school education. I'll make the case that says people need more than just a high school education. They need something beyond that to get them the true skill sets that we need in this 21st and someday 22nd century economy.
Absolutely, and we are fortunate in the Dayton region that we do have some of those educational institutions, Sinclair Community College,
Right.
You have Miami Valley Career Technology Center, that can provide that training. So we're fortunate. What have you seen in other parts of the state as far as challenges they're facing for workforce? Is it universal throughout the state?
You do see some common challenges across the state, but one of the strengths of Ohio, we have diverse regional economies, and that's a strength. But that also leads to some unique challenges. Phil was talking about the unique industries that you have here. I, along with the head of the Department of Higher Education, John Carey, we've visited Wright-Patterson a few times, and one of the emerging industries, if you will, or occupational families is around cybersecurity, not only on the base but outside of the base. And how can, and there's great work already being done here in Montgomery County in terms of the Educational Service Center, the Montgomery County ESC. They're already facilitating some great coordination between the business community and the education system. Governor Kasich talks about how do we capture the imagination of young people so they can see the jobs that are there. And so there's already good work in terms of trying to connect the school systems around this region with Wright-Patterson and also the other FUYA, for instance, the different careers and occupations that are available there. So there's already some really good coordination here in Montgomery County.
And Cathy, if I may add, Ryan just used the word coordination, and I hope he doesn't mind. I use the term alignment a lot in my conversations with the business community and many of the educational institutions. It's about aligning whatever you refer to as education and training, however you define that, and we define that in a lot of different ways, aligning it to the needs of the business community, of the jobs that are out there or that are going to be out there. And no offense, but there's no use us spending a lot of extra resources in training folks for jobs that won't appear. We need to be training for the jobs that are here or are coming. I think my son played hockey. We talked about hockey. And Gretzky used to have this saying about he didn't play where the puck was, he played to where the puck was going to be. That's why he was so great of an athlete. That's what we have to look at. We need to look at where the puck is going to be in our community, and that's that transformation of those jobs.
That's a perfect analogy for it. It really is. It's easier to understand it and picture it that way. We have programs here that expose many youth in our community, like Summer Youth Works, to different careers. And one of the things I hear consistently is when they do go to some of the manufacturing facilities, these young people, they have a vision of what manufacturing is. When they get there, it is all advanced. It's computers.
It's different.
It's not what manufacturing used to be. So, programs like that can expose them to those industries. What are your hopes for, our young people as they're
Right. So to tell you a little bit about an exercise that we've been through, the governor's office and working with the governor's executive workforce board, which Phil is a member of, last fall, Governor Kasich, he challenged his board to kind of go back to their local communities, identify the challenges that we face around workforce, and then to come up with some ideas and solutions to address those challenges. We took about 3 months where the board members did just that. They went back to the local communities. They talked to business leaders, they talked to education leaders, nonprofits, all the different stakeholders around workforce. They identified a number of challenges that we face in their communities. We categorized them, and then we came up and they took quite a bit of time to identify solutions and how we can address those challenges. So in December, the board presented to Governor Kasich a report containing about 58 recommendations of how we can address different challenges, different workforce challenges across the state. And I would tell you the theme, the overarching theme, and Phil was already getting at this, the overarching theme of the report is how do we better align the business community and the education system. For all the reasons we've talked about, the speed of change and the type of change that we're going to see in jobs, they have to be attached at the hip. The communication has to be ongoing and consistent. So from those recommendations, a number of them, of the 58 recommendations, about 20 of them became proposals in the governor's executive workforce budget, which maybe we can talk a little bit about.
Which is ongoing right now. as we speak.
Absolutely.
Right.
So we're in the middle of the budget process right now, but a lot of those budget proposals get to the very heart of how do we better align business and education across the state.
Absolutely. Collaboration and communication, those were two of the key points that you brought up. Phil, how important are those things? You touched on it a little bit, but when you're trying to strengthen your workforce?
Well, bottom line, Cathy, and you've been around the chamber for a number of years as a great volunteer, I think you understand our whole mantra, and we truly believe that without a thriving business community, we don't have a community. We don't have the quality of life. We don't have the things that we want for our children and our grandchildren and our citizens. So this is awfully important for us to get this right. We have made some good strides especially over the last 8 or 10 years. We've made some great progress, but there's still a lot of work to do, and that's why it's important that we understand the resources that are in this community. When I say community, I'm talking about the education and training community. And quite frankly, there are a lot of resources. Some people will debate that with me, but I contend that there's a lot of resources. How do you make sure that you're using those to the very best of our ability to get the type of return on investment that we want? And to the business community, education is a means to an end. It's not the end product. Workforce is the end product, because talk to any business owner, talk to any CEO, their number one asset always, if they're enlightened at all as a leader, is their people. It's their people. They drive the business, whether they are a leader or a worker, they drive the success of that business. And that's what we want. I believe that's what the governor wants. I believe the governor sees us really driving this through the education community, but making sure that we are a workforce of the 21st and 22nd century.
Yes, it really is an investment in people.
Right.
If we want to make our businesses strong. You talked about the budget for workforce.
Right.
What can we expect as this process goes along?
Thanks. I'd like to share maybe a few proposals. We've talked about the alignment of business and education. One of the constant refrains that I hear as I travel the state from business owners is we're not getting the talent that we need to grow our businesses. So one of the proposals to address that is really a call to action to the business community. They need to get in the room with our educational leaders and directly articulate what jobs and skills are available. So one of the proposals is to have local superintendents appoint 3 non-voting members to their school board who represent business interests in their local communities or their region, to serve as kind of that conduit between the education community and business. They're there to talk about what the in-demand jobs are, what the in-demand skills are, and just helping facilitate that conversation. So that's one proposal to kind of get at this.
And may I
Please,
add?
Phil.
May I add? This is a step up from what a dramatic step up, especially in some school districts. But most school districts, if not all, are supposed to have accountability committees where the business community is involved. This is a true step up to having more business leaders at the table, in the room, helping to make decisions. They may be non-voting, along with those elected school board members, but helping them understand the real alignment that needs to be done with their resources for those future jobs for their constituents. In this case, their children.
Absolutely.
That's right. And then another proposal is, how can we better position teachers when they have career counseling conversations? How can we better position them with an understanding of what the in-demand jobs and skills are in their local communities? So one of our proposals is, as a part of the licensure renewal process for teachers, is once every 5 years, are they engaging in some type of industry experience or industry tours? And I already mentioned it's happening here in Montgomery County already, where as a part of professional development days, a group of teachers will go tour local businesses, and they start to have those conversations with business owners and plant managers, and they can see the jobs that exist today and the skills that are needed. What that can start to do then is open up channels of communication between business owners and educators. And I think a positive byproduct of this is now business leaders will have a better understanding of the education climate in their local communities. It's really about starting to build stronger local communities by connecting business and educators.
Well, and I know for the teaching community, my wife is a former teacher, they could look at this and say, well, we think that we already know that answer. But quite frankly, we've been engaged in that as a chamber of trying to help teachers access some of these industries and companies out there. And what we have found is their response has actually been remarkably positive, because they thought that they knew some of the ins and outs. You started the show by saying, manufacturing at one time had this perception that it was this dirty, grimy business. It's no longer that at all. And when instructors, teachers, people from our school systems walk into these manufacturing plants, they are just amazed how much the technology is used there and how this is a different application to the skill sets of the people. And they need to be, I hope that they want to be, our strongest advocates in the schools to make sure that those children understand the opportunities that we might have in our community so that we can give them great jobs, but importantly, and I have grandchildren in this community, we want them to stay in our community.
Yes, that has been such a huge issue for many communities, but especially the Dayton region. They call it the brain drain. We have these amazing young people because we have these fantastic higher education institutions, but when they graduate, they leave, and we'd love for them to stay.
That's right.
How do you address that challenge?
Well, and the couple of proposals I shared, I think start to get at that, just creating greater awareness. The governor talks about how do we capture the imagination of young people so they understand the careers that are available to them. Another proposal as a part of our budget is how do we build out work-based learning experiences for our students. Today's schools have the flexibility to provide credit for non-classroom activities. But what we'd like to see is how could we put students in the position where they can take advantage of internships and co-ops and apprenticeship programs. We say the best way to learn about work is to work, where they can start to develop those soft skills that so many business owners seek. So I think that's another way where we can start to create greater awareness of the jobs that are here in your local community. When I talk to business owners in rural areas, a lot of times they say that our young people think they have to move away to find a job because they simply just don't know.
Right.
And no offense, but we all have busy lives, and they don't know about the jobs that exist in their communities. Those of us that live in metro areas, we all drive by 50, 60 buildings a day, and rarely do we actually know what people inside of those buildings are doing. So how do we create greater awareness about the good jobs that we have in local communities across the state of Ohio?
And I know the Chamber is very connected to young professionals.
We
What
are.
are some of the things that you hope for in engaging them?
Well, I think you hit it. I mean, you said, you used the term brain drain, and that just scares us. I mean, that's one of the things I think that keeps me awake at night. Why are we losing people? And remember, I got children and grandchildren in this community, so I think about those things. So I want to make sure that we really understand the real commitment that needs to be made by those providers of education and training to what the business community wants. But they need to hear from the business community. They need to hear what the specific needs are or what the specific jobs are so they can try to tailor their programs. The state has tremendous resources, but just like politics, education is typically local. So we just need to make sure that we're aligning the resources, both local and the state resources that might come back to communities like ours. How are we using that effectively to get the type of product we want? And that is that educated workforce that is in tune to the future jobs of our community.
Yes. And Phil, I want to talk about in 2005 how the Chamber received the Lumina Foundation grant.
That's true.
And how we're using that toward workforce.
Well, that's an interesting one because Lumina, which is located in Indianapolis, I have a good relationship with them and have for a long time. They typically have taken a lot of opportunity to talk about higher education and the needs for degrees in higher education. But even they have evolved and changed some of that mantra over the last few years. When we applied for a private sector grant, the private sector foundation from them, we said, we think you're right. This needs to drive down into the high school system. So our particular grant is really keyed to this whole transformation of young people, teachers, advisors, counselors in the high schools, learning what is available and what is needed in the business community. So that's where we're trying to take it to our local high schools. And we're not saying that the other areas aren't important. Please don't, not at all. But we're saying is someone, the Chamber of Commerce, someone has to speak on behalf of the business community to say, here's the jobs of the future. So as you're in school and you go home and your parents are helping counsel you and talk to you, we want you to be informed of the future. And we think that that grant, and we think our organization is one of the organizations that can help do that.
Definitely. Now, Ryan, what are some of the other initiatives that the governor's office has going on?
Right. Well, a few more to share with you.
Yes.
In terms of his budget. We're talking about career pathways. One proposal that's in the budget is how do we start to develop a pathway that gives multiple on-ramps and off-ramps for young people. And the example I give is aligning a recognized pre-apprenticeship program in a skilled trade and aligning it with College Credit Plus, a very successful program for the state already, which is saving parents and students a lot of money that they would spend otherwise for college. The College Credit Plus, the last year since its inception, has been really focused on kind of traditional academic pursuits. Now, if we can start to align it with recognized pre-apprenticeship programs, where a student is earning high school credit, earning college credit towards his or her apprenticeship program, and then also make some money if they're working. Now you have a pathway for a student where they may decide to go right into the workforce. They may decide to go to a 2-year institution, ultimately go to a 4-year institution. So now, and they have a credential with them that they will always have to demonstrate a skill and a competency that they have. So Phil already mentioned it earlier. The point is, how do we develop more pathways and let young people know that not every career runs through a 4-year degree. There are a lot of great jobs across the state of Ohio, across our country, that requires a 2-year degree or some type of credential and certification where you can make good wages and not incur a lot of college debt.
Definitely. Phil, do you want to add anything to that?
Just one last item, and as I think about this thing, we've made a lot of progress in Montgomery County, but our chamber represents businesses even outside of Montgomery County. So we need to make sure that our other counties are engaged in this whole initiative of making sure that their school systems and their businesses are working together and trying to align that. I'm very proud of the work that we have done in Montgomery County, the urban county. But remember, workforce is, at least it's regional. At the very least, it's regional. It's not just in the city anymore or in one town where you were born and raised. I have a neighbor that, I live in Beaver Creek, and he goes every day into Miami County, into Troy. So he passes through Greene, he passes through Montgomery, and he goes into Miami County. It is important that all of our region be uplifted by this initiative, and I hope that we can get more of that out to our other school districts and our other community leaders.
It certainly does. It has to be a regional effort.
That's right.
Final thoughts. Time is flying. We could talk about this all day, but what are some of your final thoughts?
Great. Well, no, again, appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. And I think you find in the governor's executive budget a lot of exciting proposals in terms of how do we better align business and education. We are going to face a period of time now where the churn of industries, the churn of jobs is going to take on a pace that we probably haven't seen before. I'm confident that we have the resources and assets in the state. It's just how do we better coordinate them? How do we better align them? So as we go through this churning process, that when folks do find themselves in a position where they have been dislocated for some given reason, that there are the resources and the culture of continuous learning where we can help that person get back into the workforce as quickly and as efficiently as possible. But I believe we have some proposals that really start to get at that in the governor's budget.
Looking forward to seeing those, making their magic. Final thoughts, Phil?
You know, over the years that I've been in Ohio, we've had a lot of governors that love to talk about being the education governor. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not taking a shot at anybody in the past. This is my feeling, so I'll speak personally. This governor is a worker. This governor is a workforce governor. He really understands that that's what we need at this time in Ohio. And I believe that he has given a lot of thought to that vision. And I appreciate that because that's what the business community needs. That's what we say that we need. And I hope that we are able to continue to make some great progress under his leadership. So thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. Ryan Burgess from the Governor's Office of Workforce Transformation and Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce, President and CEO Phil Parker. Thank you
Kathy.
both. And thank you for joining us for this edition of Business Connections. I'm Cathy Peterson. Thank you.
The number one topic on employers' list of challenges continues to be how they can recruit and retain a well-educated, trained, and motivated workforce. Today's program highlights one of the state's key initiatives whose sole purpose is making sure Ohio has a competitive 21st century workforce. Our guest today, Ryan Burgess, the Director of the Governor's Office of Workforce Transformation, is dedicating most of his waking hours to helping solve this challenge. Governor Kasich created this initiative and a statewide diverse board of leaders who know that if Ohio is to compete in a global economy, we must strive to have the most competent workers we can have to drive our businesses. We have much heavy lifting ahead, but have made significant progress in most of our communities across Ohio. Our region has focused much on this issue and will not stop until we can declare that Ohio has a clear competitive advantage for its many industries. If we can't get this right, it will not bode well for Ohio's economy nor its citizens. Our education and training providers play the key role in this initiative, but must have the support of business, elected leaders, and yes, even parents as we shape the future workforce. I can think of no more pressing issue than finding and creating jobs for Ohioans. But we must make sure we're using every available resource we have to implement this initiative. This is not easy, it's complex, but Ohio has many good ideas and dedicated leaders who understand our quest. We hope we can count on the support of every Ohioan to solve Ohio employers' biggest challenge.